Hi, thank you so much for joining us here at Floridian Future. I am Saga Stephen, your host today. And today we're pulling back the curtain on Florida legislature. So we've all been taught how a bill becomes law, and we know that the civics textbook is a bit of a fantasy. The real legislative process is complex, often opaque machine driven by backroom deals, powerful lobby interests, and a heavy dose of political theater. To help us decode what's actually happening behind the scenes, we're joined by Dr. Joel Rudman. Dr. Rudman didn't come up through the political establishment. As the only physician to serve in the Florida House, he brought a clinical, data-driven perspective into a chamber where optics usually trump reality. He's seen firsthand how the institutional machine protects its own and how dissent is sidelined and where the real leverage points are for those on the outside. So, if you've tired of the noise and want to understand how to actually engage with the machinery of power, this is the conversation for you. Dr. Rudman, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Saga. And boy, what an introduction. I mean, everything you said there was right on the money. And I hope we'll spend a few minutes today kind of educating people on why that is.
Yeah, and I want to ask you, are you the only doctor? I know you were the only doctor in there during your time. Are you the only doctor that's ever been in there?
So, it's funny. It kind of comes and goes. While I was there, there was a dermatologist, Dr. Ralph Masulo, who was finishing his term in the House. I believe Dr. Masulo is now in the state Senate. So, as far as I know, Saga, there's one physician in the entire legislature, and it's Dr. Masulo. But yeah, they come and go. When I was there for 2+ years, I would have candidates come by and introduce themselves. There was a pain management doctor from Ocala. There was another doctor from, I believe, St. Augustine. So you would get physicians running for office, but they either didn't have the fortitude to do what it takes to win an election, or they just didn't understand the complex machinery, that they were running against. And of course, we'll talk about that today.
Right. So for you, because you had a wonderful practice and the transition from moving from a practice, a clinical environment to the legislative floor, what was your process and what prompted you to step up?
So, short answer is COVID. I was just a regular small town family doctor, minding my own business, making a living for my family, and then COVID hit. And for a guy who's never broken the law, for a guy who's never put one foot in a bad position, I found the rank and file coming down on me. I found the American Board of Family Medicine coming down on me, Saga, not because of anything I did, but because of what I was saying. I was advising people to be skeptical of all these COVID regulations and all this COVID malarkey about staying indoors. So again, it was a violation of my First Amendment speech that made me realize, we need to do something, especially here in the free state of Florida. So, I went from being a physician to being an advocate for about a month. There was a bill in the Florida legislature to protect freedom of speech, especially in the medical realm. So I went and testified and told my story on behalf of that bill that was being run by Senator Broxson and Representative Drake. And then, Saga, driving home from that testimony, I turned to my wife in the car and I said, Sophie, they just don't get it, do they? This bill is not going to pass, is it? And she looked at me and she said, no, it's not. They're really clueless. And so that was the day I decided, look, if you want to do something right, sometimes you just have to do it yourself. So I threw my hat in the ring. Like you said, political outsider, political unknown. The only people that knew me were my patients here in Navarre, Florida. We pulled a great upset. I was a Republican that won a Republican primary against a candidate who was endorsed by Matt Gaetz, who is beloved up here in the Panhandle. We won that
Right.
something like 67 to 33%. So just a real drubbing. Um, so yeah, that's what catapulted me into the legislature. And then, as we'll talk about, you say, all right, I'm here to change things, and we certainly did. I took that same bill, I dusted it off, I added a few more precautions to that bill, And Ron DeSantis signed that medical freedom bill into law right up here in my hometown panhandle. So yeah, we did get some accomplishments done, but certainly, regardless of which party's in power, you're going to find that a lot of times the deck is just stacked against the common man, stacked against the working individual. And that's the danger that we need to talk about today is that sometimes, it's not enough to just have an R after your name. You've got to
Right.
listen to the candidate. You've got to know what is their philosophy. Because, Saga, let me tell you, there's lots of quote unquote Republicans in Tallahassee who are not conservative. There's lots of Republicans in Tallahassee that opt for things that are unconstitutional.
That is very true. I have experienced some of that. So I guess that leads to, um, and that is a perfect segue into the culture shock, discussing the immediate realization of how the different legislative process works from what the public is taught. Because you went from, I'm a doctor, I know these things, you're a data-driven person, most doctors are. And then you go there and you see the lobbyists, you see the backroom deals. So how was that for you? And what was when you put your doctor lens on, what there surprised you and what did you discover that you had to do or try to get done?
So that's a good point. When I first got to Tallahassee, there was a gentleman there who's been in political circles for decades. He's kind of a political consultant. He's kind of a prognosticator, if you will. When you go in his office, he has memorabilia from the Reagan Bush era. So he's been doing this a long time. And this political um, I guess you would call him a political consultant. This consultant pulled me aside and he said, "This is when I first got to Tallahassee. He said, 'You're going to hate it here.'" And I said, "Well, what do you mean by that?" He said, "Well, because," he said, "you're from a profession." He says, "You've had to excel at everything you've done, and you've had to be very learned, very intelligent." He said, "None of that is the currency of Tallahassee." He said, "The only currency they understand here, they understand money and they understand seniority." He said, "And you don't have either. You're not bought and sold by the corporate interests, and you're a new guy." He said, "So you're going to find it really frustrating. You're going to have topics that you're going to know more about than anyone else in the room, and they're not going to want to listen." And he said, "You'll have to be here 6 or 7 years before they finally start to listen and value your opinion." And Simon, he couldn't have been more accurate. I mean, that's exactly what I ran into in Tallahassee. To give you an idea, I get there and obviously medical freedom was a big thing for me. Obviously, being a physician, the healthcare system in America is broken, not just Florida, but across the nation. I mean, look at your last hospital bill if you want proof of that. And
Right.
so, I had definite priorities. I had a definite agenda when I got to Tallahassee. And, I get there and they assign you to committees that have nothing to do with your field of expertise. So you have a physician who's mostly assigned to education committees. Now, you know, I mean, if you're a teacher or if you're a parent of young children, maybe you know more about education than I do. My expertise was in healthcare, and I found myself butting heads with chairmen of healthcare committees who literally knew nothing about healthcare. There was a chairwoman of one committee who had to be told what the difference is between an MD and a DO and a nurse practitioner. She just didn't know the difference. Um, so to me, that was the frustrating thing, and there's examples of that all across the board. It wasn't anything targeting me. It's just the way Tallahassee operates. They don't set up the system to affect change. They set up the system to propagate the current system. So you had doctors like me assigned to education committees. You had lawyers who were elected to Tallahassee in the sense of they wanted to reform insurance and they wanted to bring down the crooked insurance companies. So what do? They don't put them on judiciary committees. They put them on environmental committees. So again, it wasn't just me. It was across the board. But Saga, I think this is an important point for your viewers to understand. A guy like me who lost about $100,000 a year from serving his country. Because again, while I'm in Tallahassee, I can't see patients. So my business suffered. You had a guy like me, my wife is suffering, my family's suffering, my hometown is suffering, my business is suffering. For me, beating my head against the wall for 2+ years, it was more than I can handle. I said, look, if I'm not going to affect change, I'm out of here. Now, what they count on those lawyers, they count on those small town heroes. They count on them getting there, getting assigned to committees where they can't make change, and they count on those politicians forgetting why they got there in the first place. So yeah, I took my ball and went home, but I can tell you there are handfuls of other people who were elected the same year I was elected to affect change. They're not affecting change, but yet they forgot why they're elected and they are still there not to make a difference. They're there because they love the trappings, they love the power.
That's really sad, and you're
It is.
absolutely right. You're absolutely right. So, in the committee process you talk about, to me, that's mind-boggling to me. If you're a doctor, you should absolutely be on the health care. If you're an attorney, I mean, we need to take back the power.
I
So,
know.
in a committee, yeah, in a committee, um, how are the bills actually killed? I mean, it almost sounds like a lot of them were put there to be killed. How are the bills actually killed? And explain the silent mechanisms of who actually sets the agenda.
I can give you a perfect example of how this works. So I probably sponsored 3 or 4 or 5 different groundbreaking medical bills while I was in office. One of which being a bill that would eliminate physician non-competes. So if your audience doesn't know what I'm talking about, if you've ever had a doctor that you've loved and trusted, and if you've ever gone back for your 6-month appointment and your beloved doctor's no longer there, and the secretary looks at you like, yeah, we don't know what happened to him or her. That's a lie. What's happened is your doctor's been employed by a large healthcare system. Usually the hospitals in the area employ doctors nowadays. Not me. I'm an independent physician. I run my own practice. Nobody hires and fires me. I'm my own boss. But I would say 90% of doctors nowadays in the state of Florida, they work for a corporation. And
Yeah.
so what happens, Saga, they get these doctors into the group, into the business. Usually these doctors are fresh out of medical school, fresh out of residency. So they have no idea what their market value is. They get there, the corporations, they overwork them, they underpay them. And then when the doctor realizes that he's being had, if he wants to renegotiate, guess what? It's written in the contract, and this is legal under Florida law. The corporations write the contracts where if there is a disagreement, that physician has to move out of the area. They can't, if there's a business agreement, if they're being asked to do immoral or unethical things, that physician can't just say, you know what, I'm going to open up my own shop across the street. We're going to have fair market competition. I think I can do this better than you, Mr. Corporate Bean Counter. In Florida, they're not allowed to do that. Every contract has what's called a non-compete. So if your doctor doesn't like the way Advent Health runs things, or if your doctor discovers that HCA is a bunch of scumbags, because they are, that doctor then is asked to leave the county, leave the area. In some cases, Saga, they're asked to leave the state. So I had a bill that would actually ban that practice in the state of Florida. It's already illegal in our neighboring states. Up here in the Florida panhandle, we lose doctors to Alabama all the time because just 1 hour to the west in Alabama, non-competes are illegal. So I wasn't proposing anything crazy. I was proposing something that would bring our state in line with most red states, most conservative states, because we believe in free markets. We believe in
Mhm.
competition. We believe in you being the engine and the driver of your own future. So when I filed the bill, the chairman of Health and Human Services at the time was this character that probably everybody's gotten to know over the last few years. Randy Fine was our chairman. And Randy Fine would not give my bill a single hearing. When I would go talk to Randy in his office about why my bill wasn't on the agenda, first of all, I'd have to sit in his lobby for about 30 minutes while lobbyists were pouring in and out of his office. That wasn't a common practice in my office, but apparently it was standard operating procedure for him. I was always told legislators just walk right in. Not in Randy's case. No, no, no. The lobbyists walked right in. And so while I'm sitting out in the waiting room, with all these power brokers going in and out of his office, yeah, occasionally he would listen to me for 2 minutes, and he would be very dismissive. Again, it's his attitude was, "Oh, you doctors, you think you're so smart, you think you know everything. Why don't you fix your own problem?" And this, in a microcosm, is how Tallahassee works. It's all about power. So with Randy Fine, it wasn't about affecting change in the state. It wasn't about making the lives of Floridians better when it comes to healthcare. It wasn't about allowing more doctors to stay in the state. Because as you know, Saga, we have a healthcare shortage. There's a doctor shortage in the state of Florida, and they
Mm-hmm.
don't know what to do about it. And they're doing things that are absolutely going to ruin healthcare in the state. But he wasn't interested in any of that. He was more interested in talking to the lobbyists, getting checks, getting support probably for his upcoming, congressional run. And that was that. My bill was never heard.
Well, my brain is exploding in so many ways because I know also I worked for a doctor up in Minnesota, and we opted out of and he was the chief over a very large hospital system. And one day somebody from admin called and said, "No, you can't do this with your patient." And he's like, "Excuse me, when did you get your medical license?" At that point, he left there, signed the non-compete. So he had to, basically twiddle his thumbs for 2 years. And then he opened his own clinic, opting out of Medicare. So
Uh-huh.
it's a cash pay. And this is in Minnesota, actually treat patients how they need to be treated. And I never realized this. I ran the lab there, but in that we had opted out, we could then do lab tests for people that if you take insurance or are in Medicare, you can't even do these lab tests. And he was seeing 80% of our clientele patients were either misdiagnosed or not diagnosed from Mayo. So yeah, and then I come down to Minnesota, and here it's a naturopathic doctor can't get a license.
Yeah.
And all that
And
is an option. That's all it is. It's an option for people. But in any event, I digress here. So
no, no,
with the
that's actually perfect, Saga, because that's another example. Representative David Smith, who's a good, loyal Republican, he filed a bill in the state of Florida to recognize naturopaths in the state of Florida, to actually
yes.
have a system where they can get licensed. Right now, it's the Wild West in Florida. If you go to visit a naturopath, you have no idea if it's a dog mom, running it out of her backyard, or if it's truly a naturopath. So Representative Smith, God bless him, he said, look, this has to be regulated and licensed, just like doctors, just like pharmacists. And he came to me for support. And, I supported him 100%. I said, David, you are absolutely 100% right. We live in the greatest state in the union. We should be great at everything we do, including
Mhm.
naturopaths. So I didn't actually see a problem with that. I was actually a very vocal supporter of that movement, Saga. So I do actually appreciate you giving that example, because there's another
Absolutely.
example of where Florida refuses to move forward. And why is that? Because it's not the status quo. We have a lot of people who like to use the Republican name to get elected, but they're not interested in moving this party forward under conservative principles. They're interested in entrenching the powers that are already they're interested in taking money.
But what I don't understand is, again, Minnesota and Florida are polar opposites. Okay.
Yes.
Healthcare is better in Minnesota than it is in Florida. And to me, that's
True.
absolutely insane.
Yeah.
So, I don't understand. And for the sake of what do these lobbyists not want that kind of health freedom for us, because it's not forcing you to do something, it's offering an option. So help me understand the lobbyist ecosystem, and also, okay, the people that are, I just, like I say, I don't understand how
Well, so,
lobbyists run it as opposed to we the people.
I think the thing that your viewers have to understand is that the whole system, unfortunately, is predicated on money. Money allows you to get elected, and I don't mean it buys votes or anything, but what it buys coverage. When I
Right.
was running as a political unknown, thank God I was running against a horrible candidate in the Republican primary. Otherwise, it would have been impossible to get traction. Now, as a physician, I had my own monetary reserves. We
Right.
had a lot of small donors, so we raised a lot of money. I believe over $200,000. That was all,
Oh, wow.
$20 here, $50 there. So we were able to amass a campaign fund to take the fight to this awful candidate. But Saga, everyone knows that money is essential for putting mailers in your mailboxes, for putting
Right.
ads on TV, putting ads on social media. And so the lobbyists, they use that. And to be honest, it's not just the lobbyists that use it, it's your own party that uses it. So a guy like me, a guy that's a true conservative, Anthony Sabatini, God bless him, he called me the second most conservative member of the Florida legislature. Bernie Jacques, by the way, would be number one. I was number two. So
Yeah.
here I am, praised by conservatives, and not just in my area, but across the state. My own party would come to me when I would get out of line, when I would put the Bill of Rights before special interest, when I would put the Constitution before special interest. My own leaders of my party would come to me and they'd say, "Hey, look, if you want our support for your reelection, you need to get in line." Matter of fact, the local good old boys up here in the Panhandle, they actually planned to run a candidate against me after my first term. They were going to primary an incumbent Republican who was one of the most popular Republicans in the state. And whereas my attitude was, yeah, sure, bring it on, let's have that fight. The Republican Party of Florida came to me and they said, "Look, okay, we'll defend you. I mean, don't worry. I mean, we'll fight for you. But just understand that if you cost us money in a seat that's always been like if we have to actually back you against a primary candidate, understand we're going to be real pissed at you. Like for your next 6 years, we're never going to help you because you've basically cost us money that we need to win the Orlando seat or we need to win the Miami seat." So it was very much a money driven process. And even for a guy like me who didn't need their money, they still let you know that, hey, you're hurting us indirectly because we need this money to prop up a rhino in Fort Lauderdale. We need this money to prop up a rhino down in Naples, Florida.
And this is another thing that I always say is people need to, when you find these really good conservative people who their heart is there for the Constitution, for the state, for we the people, and they truly represent the constituents, you need to donate to the candidate directly, whether it's
Yes.
$5, $100, whatever. You need to donate to the candidate directly. You need to support them, whether it's knocking on doors or posting on your social media, because it's a uphill climb. And it is an uphill climb in a very unfair world. And what we want to do here is educate the grassroots, because there truly is more of us than there are of them. And if we can educate them how the process works and how we can empower more honest people, if you will, more people that are truly running for you to represent the constituents, as opposed to telling you what you want to hear and then getting there and going like, yeah, now we're not going to do that. And it's a lot of people get up there and get amnesia. It's like, no, yeah, no. And then all of a sudden they're bought and sold. And that has happened so much. It's sad. And I'm doing whatever I can to help turn that tide. So thank you for running. I appreciate that.
Well,
um,
and your
and I
points
really
are
miss you up there. I loved you up there.
you tell me that every post I make on social media, and I
I know.
appreciate that. But no, to your viewers out there, Stog is 100% correct. If you find that local candidate running for state office, running for Congress, we're going to talk about people running for governor. Um, if you find somebody that's saying the words that come out of your mouth, only they're coming out of the candidate's mouth. If you find that person you really believe in, the best way you can make that happen, just go on their website and give them $10. I mean, give them
Yeah.
$20 if you can afford it. We're not talking, you don't have to replace Big Sugar, right? You don't have to write $1,000 check. You don't have to write, I didn't need $5,000 checks when I ran for state legislature, when I unsuccessfully ran for Congress. But what you do need, like Saga is saying, you do need the ability to put mailers out. You do need the
Yeah.
ability to pay for social media ads. So a $5 donation, a $10 donation from every viewer would get the right people elected. Like I said, I will probably never run for office again because I didn't cater to special interests. Most of my resources were my personal resources. So I effectively, serving 2 years, 2.5 years, I effectively put my retirement back about 10 years. So I've got to take care of my family first. But these politicians that you hate, the ones that don't speak for you, but yet they're running every 2 years, and you're like, why won't they go away? Connect the dots. They're not
Right.
spending their private resources. That's why they're
Right.
willing to do it next year,
And that's
4 years.
where we the general public, we the people need to step up and stand up with those who do, cuz throwing your hat in the ring is not an easy thing. I had to have a serious back to Jesus talk with myself, and that was for a local office.
Yeah.
And it's like, however, I'm so glad I did, and God had a plan for that, because if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't be here doing this. So a
And
lot of people, it's like, even if you run and don't win, all the issues you brought up still need to be addressed.
well, and don't misunderstand. We're not saying buy the candidate. So when we say it's about money, we're not saying, okay, you need to get a crooked candidate. No, you've got
No, no, no,
very
no, no.
good candidates
Right.
that simply can't get their message out. I'll give you one example on the statewide front right now. There's this candidate named Matt the Welder who's doing his best to speak out for the average Floridian, protect your natural resources, fight the corruption that's going on in Tallahassee. Now, the only way Matt the Welder's going to have a chance is if you go online and give him $10, and if and he needs a lot of those small donations. That's how you fight Big Sugar. That's how you fight corporate interests. That's how you fight all the crooked elements in politics. But you're not buying Matt the Welder. In
No.
my case, I probably wouldn't have won my election if not for the support of the Florida Medical Association. But did they buy and sell me? Not at all. There were several times in the legislature where they came and got in my face and shouted at me for votes I took. I said, look, you don't own me. You may have helped me get elected, but you don't own me. We're in this to do what's right for the Floridian people, not for
Right.
special interests. So again, don't think your support to a candidate like Matt the Welder, or to a candidate like there's lots of other grassroots
Yeah.
candidates out there, but he's a good example. Don't think somehow you're going to be enticing him, or making him do things he doesn't want to do. That is untrue. What you're doing is you're helping him get that populist message out.
Right. So if there is someone like that out there, um and those kind of people, they have the heart and they have the integrity, you wind them up and let them go, and put
Absolutely.
them out there. And that's great, because it's kind of like, okay, so he hasn't served, he hasn't this, that, and the other. However, he's rock solid. I mean, he, from what I've seen, is pretty much rock solid.
Well,
So,
and that's the way you've got a good candidate. That's how you've got a true conservative. Saga, I have a podcast nowadays. It's called Making Waves, the Florida Report, that your viewers
I
can
know,
go
I
look
love
at
it.
on YouTube. Well, and every week, right, I've got a topic that I think is important for Floridians to hear. Now, if you agree with me on every single podcast, all right, great. I mean, we must be blood brothers or something. But real conservatives, real leaders that want to affect change, you're not going to agree with me 100%. There may be a topic where you're like, I don't know if I buy that. And
Right.
it's true of my relationship, for example, with Governor Ron DeSantis. I would take a bullet for Governor DeSantis. I would love to see Governor Ron DeSantis be President Ron DeSantis one day. But that doesn't mean we agree 100% of the time. We differ on things like malpractice rights. I think there's a segment of the Florida population that currently can't sue doctors, and I think that's unconstitutional. Uh, I also disagree with him over things like Medicaid, the safety net we have for poor people. Right now in Florida, that safety net is non existent. It's abysmal. It's federal dollars. It's not our money, it's federal dollars. I say use those federal dollars to make a better safety net. But again, these are just instances where good conservatives, good Republicans can disagree. And hey, if you don't agree with what I just said, that's fine. We agree on 98% of the other things. So again, if you've got that candidate who wants to overthrow the entrenched, right? If you've got that candidate that wants to overthrow the Rick Scott types, the business as usual types, don't hold it against them that they said one word that you disagreed with. Or Saga, I'll tell you the other thing I would run into on the campaign trail. I would be saying exactly what a follower wanted to hear, right? Exactly what they believed. But then they would come to me and they'd say, "Yeah, I just can't vote for you." Well, wait a minute. We agree on everything. Philosophically, you said I just gave a voice to how you feel on the inside. Why are you not going to vote for me? Well, it's because I saw a photo of you shaking Joe Bob's hand over in Destin, and I hate Joe Bob. So if you're a friend of Joe Bob's, you can't be a candidate of mine. Ladies and gentlemen, if there's one lesson to take home from this podcast, it's that to win an election, you have to get to 51%. That is the hardest number in the world to get to. So if there's a guy who, doesn't mow his grass, or if there's a guy whose dog poops in your lawn, don't begrudge me that I need his vote to get to 51%. Don't hold that against me because your grassroots candidate is going to need every vote they can get.
Very true. And the other thing about agreeing, I don't agree with me 100% of the time. And I also
Right.
know that if you have 10 issues and you're taking care of 9 of them, people will just stick on that one. Well, he didn't this. And I'm like, oh my goodness, people, people, people. These people have
Hmm.
obviously never lived in a large family,
Right.
you know? So, um, media, media coverage. This is a hard one. I see it as very difficult for. And this is where the support your candidate and the money comes in, because there's a lot of, let me see, how should I say this nicely? I'll just say it bluntly. There's a lot of lying out there. There's a lot of twisting of words. There's a lot of, okay, we're going to take this little part of this sentence here and make it sound like this. And I don't know how to best get around that or how to help candidates out. So from a candidate perspective, what would be some actionable leverage that we as the grassroots could do to spread the word about good candidates? Where can we actually apply pressure?
Well, and that's the $1 million question, isn't it? Because when I was running for elected office, we had a local little rag here in Navarre. I wouldn't even go to call it a newspaper. It's more of a gossip column than anything. But Saga, there, you have this proliferation of what's called pay to play media. The media no longer cares about a story. As you know from my time in the legislature, we had a tragedy up here in Navarre Beach where a single mother was kidnapped and killed by her ex. It's the case of a woman called Cassie Carley. As you know, when
Mhm.
I got elected, I passed a law called the Cassie Carley Law that helps protect mothers and fathers during custody exchanges. So this was a custody exchange gone bad out in the darkness out on Navarre Beach. We passed a law to make that where you're not going to do that anymore. Custody exchanges are going to be filmed. They're going to be in secure locations, so no bad actors can do anything. But while I was running for office, Cassie was murdered. And on the anniversary of her birthday, I announced my Cassie Carly law at my local church. Again, candidate Rudman rolling out a plan that will keep this from happening to our community in the future. Do you know how many news crews were there to cover it?
None.
Zero. The local paper uh, who had been pretty vocal, in terms of being out there and letting people know there's an election going on. The local paper, they sent me back a text. This horrible, horrible gossip reporter said, "You must not understand how it works. You pay me, I show up at your event." And I'm thinking, wow, welcome to politics. Welcome to the trash media. And, at the state level, there's a state version of that. There's a website run by some sleazy guy down in on the west coast of Florida who actually has a history of writing bad checks. He's been arrested for that. He runs a gossip column that all the politicians look at, right? And it's pay to play journalism. If you write him a check, uh, he'll tell the state of Florida how great a legislator you are. If you don't write him a check, he'll try to tear you down. So obviously, he writes a lot of columns and he does a lot of thumbs downs in his reports that he gives to me because he doesn't get any money from me. And who does he give thumbs ups to? Well, the Rick Scotts of the world, the Byron Donaldses of the world. So again, honest media is important, but practically non-existent. And so
True.
what you need to ask yourself, if you don't believe the media, if you say, boy, the media is disgusting, all right, well, then your next step should be, well, why are they shoving this candidate in my face? Again, connect the dots. They are not in it for you. If there's a candidate that you're hearing a lot about, guess why you're hearing a lot about him? It's either paid media coverage or he's in bed with the crooked media.
Right. Yeah, when I was running, there was, I mean, so many articles done about me from Politico to the local paper. None of these people ever even spoke to me.
Right.
Nobody called. And I'm like, where are you getting this? And I, of course, found out where they were getting it. Um, Yes. So, and I even, and the sad thing is there actually used to be journalists that would report the news and let you see both sides and make up your own mind. And now it's come to, they're not necessarily journalists, they're opinion writers.
Right.
And I think that it's becoming more and more in vogue, if you will, for citizen journalists. And sadly and gladly, we have citizen journalists that are out there because we need it. We need that, or a real journalist that simply reports the news. Just report here's the facts, here's the facts. Not like, well, she this or she that, or he this or he that. And there's nothing behind it. And yeah, the pay to play, which again is why you need to keep supporting your local candidates directly, not through a party, but give to them directly, which is good.
You're
So,
you are correct. Absolutely. That same pundit, that same gossipist here locally, uh, they call themselves Republican, but they disagreed with my legislation. I filed legislation to make it where every county in Florida could recall corrupt officials. Um, so again, something we all should be behind, right? Who wants corrupt officials? Well,
yeah,
guess what? The pay for play journalists want corrupt officials because that's who pays them. So this
right.
this corrupt journalist, not only did she not cover me, but she started, once I got in office, she started doing weekly posts about how terrible I was. So pay to play, it cuts both ways. Not only do you not need them, not only do you want to support these parasites, but then they actively campaign against your grassroots people like you, Saga, because you're not going to toe the line. You're not going to
Right.
do their bidding. And so that's how that happens.
Yeah. And it's also, it's like, again, it goes back to how then do you distinguish between a representative who's actually going to work for you and one who's not? And then how also, like, being a genuine outsider, how do you build enough power to change the system?
So I attempted that, right? I attempted to build a little bit of a coalition, right, across party lines. So as a leading conservative, right, people knew what they were getting in me. They knew they weren't going to change my mind about anything. I was strong First Amendment, strong Second Amendment. I filed all kind of gun bills while I was in office, so they knew what they were getting from me. So it's almost like Nixon was the only person that could go talk to China, right? Because you're such a strong conservative that they know they're not going to bend you. That was my attitude in the legislature. I wasn't afraid to talk to anyone because they knew what they were getting in me. They knew that I meant what I said and I said what I meant. So I could have those hard discussions with fellow Republicans. I could even have those hard discussions with a few conservative Democrats across the
Hmm.
aisle who didn't really like the nonsense coming from those radical liberals on, in their party. So,
Right.
I tried to build coalitions while I was there. But, in my opinion, the entrenched system is just so strong. We literally had a situation when I was reelected in 2024. I resigned shortly thereafter to run for Congress. And one of the reasons I resigned is that my own party, the Republican Party, held a powwow. The very day I was sworn in for my second term, the Republicans held a powwow where they told us, number one, we're not going to do what DeSantis says anymore. We're going to come up with our own ideas. I'm like, what? DeSantis is the leading conservative voice in our state. You're going to go to war with DeSantis? Number two, they said we don't really like the Republicans in the Senate either. I'm like, oh my God, this is civil war. This is mutiny. Number three, you House members sitting here, you Republicans sitting in front of us, don't you dare try to form a freedom caucus, sticking to conservative ideals and conservative principles, because we will make life very uncomfortable for you if you try to go against the parties. So, in other words, no freedom caucus. And then the last word of advice was, "Hey, and if you think you're better than us, there's the door." And so I chose the door because, yeah, it's funny. These conservatives in name only, these rhinos as we know them, they're numerous. They're numerous. And so I think going into an election year, going into the 26th election, your voters need to understand. And I think more and more people, Saga, are waking up to the reality. The only language that politicians understand is your vote. You
Hmm.
do not have to choose between the lesser of two evils. Whoever told you that, they're lying to you. The
Hmm.
only way you're going to get your party to change is to treat your vote like the gold it is. If the Republicans trot out some candidate, like, believe it or not, this crook Evan Power, the leader of the Republican Party of Florida, he set himself up to be congressman for Florida's second district. He's basically wanting to clear a path so that he can have even more power. And this guy he's a professional lobbyist. So to me, Saga, I don't care if you're Republican or not. We do not elect lobbyists to be our congressman. So I would rather, if I'm in congressional district 2, if Evan Power wins the primary, which I doubt he will, he's running against a great Republican candidate in Keith Gross. If Keith Gross wins, he's one of us. You go vote for him.
Oh,
If
good.
Evan
Who is
Power,
that?
if
Who did
Evan
you say?
Keith Keith Gross, a local from Panama City, which is basically the heart of the district. But if a lobbyist wins the Republican nomination, sit your butt at home, because that's the only way your party will change its ways. That sometimes they have to lose an election to realize, oh, shoot, we're doing this wrong. We're doing this wrong. We got away from what the people wanted. And to be honest, Saga, I'm afraid that may happen in a lot of races in 26. I am not going to turn out to vote for a candidate where I have to hold my nose. I'm just not going
No,
to do it.
no. And I think also in my world, the silver lining behind COVID is that it opened a lot of people's eyes. I think things were so good that people got way complacent. And I think
Yeah.
now people are questioning everything. And you have to question everything on down to the local races. You have to question because again, the lobbyists, the power players that are out there, and they send the mailers and they do all these kind of things, and they try to squish somebody who may not have the money to get the message out. And that's where, again, I guess I'm going to call on the citizen journalists and those of us that really are. I mean, I bleed red, white, and blue. My faith gave me the courage, and freedom gave me the passion to do what I'm doing. And we absolutely need to pray to keep this city, this state, this country covered, and also the good candidates, because we're in such a war on so many levels. And
Yeah.
there's such power against us in the physical realm, the spiritual realm, a lot of money. It's if you look at who donates to the candidates, and look at where that money's coming from, and look at how much this company or that company or this person donated to a specific candidate. Because if they're donating hundreds of thousands of dollars, that is not to go in there and represent the constituents. I can
Right.
guarantee that. I can absolutely guarantee it. So in any event, I believe in my heart of heart and soul of souls that the grassroots will rise up, and we, the people, will learn that we have to get out and take a stand and be loud and be proud. And I believe that we can take our city, our state, and our government back.
Well, and on that, Saga, I'll give you a final warning to your viewers who are watching this podcast. I've actually got to go see patients this morning, so for my farewell, let me leave you with this. It's really important to know who you're voting for. It's really important to, like you say, go to alternate media sources, go to YouTube, go to our podcast, Making Waves, the Florida Report, listen to podcasts like this. Um, it's really important to treat your vote like the gold it is. As you and I have been talking about, Saga, a lot of these candidates, they're bought and sold. There's a reason why the candidates that you loathe the most, the candidates that you hate the most, there's a reason they keep popping up every 2 to 4 years. They're playing with house money. They're playing with special interest money. They have no skin in the game, so to speak. We have a couple of those politicians up here in the Panhandle, unfortunately. But yes, there is a definite money trail that's very easy to follow. And Saga, I'll do you one better. There's also an endorsement trail that your grassroots can follow as well. So let's say, just as an example, as a hypothetical, let's say, okay, I don't really care for Representative Alex Andrade. Well, look to see who that representative endorses. Who is he vocal about? Who does he stay silent with? Because, these politicians, there's unfortunately there's strength in numbers. So
Yeah.
no matter who your arch enemy is, no matter who you think is doing the worst job in Tallahassee, I promise you they can't do it alone. They have to have friends in high places. So if there's someone you don't care for and you notice, hey, they seem to be all in for this gubernatorial candidate, well, there's probably a reason why they're all in. They're probably in cahoots. They probably have similar philosophies. They probably think the same way about the voters.
Well, it's interesting because, like I say, one of the things I did is I split the pack, and I did have people talk to me about, well, if you do this and if you sit out this time, we'll, fund you and sponsor you and endorse you next time. And and I said, well, I know it was just really weird. And again, I had never been in politics before. So I was like, oh, that's kind of goofy. And the other thing I said is like, anybody who wants to give me money, I'll take it. But please don't think that you're buying me. Please don't think that sorry. And I talked to somebody else who also ran for a House seat. And this group had come to her and asked her, look, we'll get you in, we'll this, that, and the other, all the big promises. You just have to do what we say. And she's like, what if I don't agree with what you say? And so she passed, and they told her, if you run, we will crush you. And so they
Wow.
went to the next person, And sure enough, the next person, got in. And it was like, wow, that's just really weird. However, Joel, maybe it's the Pollyanna in me. I really do believe that the more we educate the grassroots and the people out there now, they're like, oh, so-and-so is going to win. He's got this endorsement. It doesn't matter. It does matter. And it's like what you were saying about your vote is gold. Your vote is absolute gold. And, like in Lakeland, it's really sad. I think only 16% of registered voters voted. And another person I know did like a whole data spreadsheet. And she said, in reality, because of the lack of people voting and this, that, and the other, somebody could actually win the governor race with 250,000 votes.
Wow. Wow. Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, we got to get out there and knock doors because I know who I want in.
Well, and and hopefully we have some people in the grassroots that are watching this podcast that are thinking, how can I make a difference? How can I be the change that I want to see? And of course, Saga, you and I, we both have experience. We want to encourage everyone to have their voice heard, whether it's through voting, whether it's through volunteering, whether you think you are a potential candidate for county commission, for state legislature. But, Saga, the one thing I do want to warn people, though, is that, it's very easy to know your enemy, right? So if you have a crooked county commissioner, if you have a state representative in office who's currently not listening to the constituents, okay, it's really easy to identify who you don't want in office. But we also have to remind our future leaders that it's important to be pragmatic as well, because what we've had twice now up here in Santa Rosa County, we had a disputed county commissioner's race where it was obvious that who we needed to get out of office. But we had two really good candidates running against the incumbent. And so we were very much at risk of splitting the vote and restoring that same incumbent back into office. Same thing happened with my replacement at House District 3. Right now, House District 3 is not represented by someone who lives in Santa Rosa County. He lives in the neighboring county. And how does that happen? Because you had more than one viable candidate from our county. And so again, they split the votes. You guys have to understand that it's great to want to be the change. And again, I would encourage everybody out there, if you think you can make a difference, throw your hat in the ring. But at the end of the day, as you get closer to primary time, you have to realize what I said earlier. 51% is a very hard number to come by. You have to get 51% of the votes to win an election. Most of us get more. I mean, last time around, I got upwards of 67%. But my point is, if you don't stand a chance, all you're doing is siphoning votes off from a potential champion who could be your voice. So again, I would encourage everyone to run if you feel called to run. But at the end of the day, before it's too late, take one last look around, a month before the primary, and be honest with yourself, be honest with your supporters and say, am I helping or hurting? Because I think the last thing you want to do is be the reason why a nasty, wicked incumbent gets another term in office.
That's true. I highly encourage everybody to run for a myriad of reasons. First of all, you'll learn a lot about yourself, and it will either strengthen or change your views and your perspective, because you will be challenged. And I think challenge is good. I love to learn and I love to be challenged. And also the different subjects, issues that you bring up, they have to address them. They've got to be addressed, which is really kind of cool.
Absolutely.
So,
I unsuccessfully ran for Congress to fill Matt Gaetz' seat. And, I ran against 8 other excellent choices and then a choice that wasn't so good who actually won the nomination. But, every time I was on the stage with those 8 other Republicans, I didn't discourage them. I didn't say, what the heck are you doing here? Like you say, it's great to have different viewpoints and different opinions and to want to represent your community. That is a fantastic thing. But I tell you, Saga, I think I'm maybe just too naive, because in both of the races I was referring to, in House District 3 for my replacement and then for the county commission race, both instances, I sat the warring parties down and I told him, I said, guys, look, we can't have that incumbent get back. We can't have the bad guy win. Can we have a tentative agreement here that, hey, let's commission a poll, right? Whoever's
Yeah.
got the edge and whoever doesn't stand a chance, let's join forces. Let's don't sink each other's ships. And again, I guess I'm
Right.
kind of naive because no one ever agrees to that. We're looking at a Republican primary for governor where we might
I
have
know.
the same exact situation. I've got two candidates that I love, Paul Renner, who I served with in the Florida House, and Senator
Mhm.
Jay Collins, who was in the Senate. I served with Jay. So
Mhm.
I've got two people that I could back, and I'm just hopeful that before we have to choose between our two favorite children, I'm hopeful that there can be a meeting of the minds and maybe even a teaming up of forces. But again, maybe I'm just too naive for this business. I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm right there with you though. And again, I love it. I love it because we need more people like that. I don't think it's naive. I don't think it's naive in that it's hopeful, it's trusting. It's like it makes sense. It's like, okay, look, let's pull together. We're a team. Let's do this together. I'm right with you there. I had, with Collins, because I haven't served with him, of course, or either of them, but I've, been working with Renner since 2022 on a couple different issues. And then also with, Collins, I, went in there on a couple different issues that I had there as well. So I'm getting down to the more brass tacks with them and just, trying to narrow it down because I do not want the one who right now has the big endorsement and all the money. Because again, go back to look where the money's coming from. If you have a lot of money coming from out of state and you have a lot of money with people that don't necessarily want your best interests or Florida's best interests at heart, that should speak volumes, absolute volumes.
Well, and to your point, it's very important that we pick not just a Republican, but it's
Right.
important that we pick a true Republican because I will remind the voters right up here in the Florida Panhandle. I did a podcast recently on how our public beaches, the world's most beautiful beaches out here on Highway 38, were taken away from the public. That wasn't a Democrat that did that. That was a faux Republican who fooled us. When we talk about our gun rights across the state of Florida, we can sit here and yell at Democrats all day, but Democrats were not in the majority when our gun rights were taken away. It took a quote unquote Republican governor to take our gun rights away. So again, saying you're a Republican, that's not enough for me. You've got to prove you're I have
No.
to see it in your actions. I have to see it in your deeds. And I'm afraid 2026, we have another choice between real Republicans and those that just want to be Republicans.
Right. Because, and again, it's like, okay, so who, this is something I'm actually going to do on the channel here at some
Mhm.
point is who here honors the Constitution?
Right.
Because a lot of people don't know what the Constitution says. They've never read it. And it's the size of a pamphlet. It's like, this is it. It's like, this is it. So I am literally at some point going to sit down here and read the Constitution and go over, okay, this is what this means. And it's very simple. The U.S. Constitution, how we built our country. If you saw the Florida State Constitution, it's like the Encyclopedia Britannica. It's huge. But in any event, I do. And I think sometimes I call it whispering voices. I think people get whispering voices in their ears and succumb to things. And I go back, if you look at it in a spiritual context, which I am a very strong believer. And if you look at it, Satan has three jobs: to steal, to kill, and destroy. And he is the father of lies. He will twist. And people, they listen to a twist. It's like, how do you poison a dog? You don't just put down a bowl of ammonia and go, eat, drink.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
take a steak, which is a huge piece of truth, and you poison the steak. And I think that's what happens is people buy into a huge piece of truth that's poisoned. And Satan takes anything that is good and twists it for bad. And right now there's so much infighting within the Republicans, which, probably because we're all like our independence and our freedom. But it's one of the things I see it as, people, you need to calm down, because is this your pride? Oh, well, they didn't return my call. Oh, well, they didn't this, they didn't that. And I was like, stop it. Think about it. It's not about you. It's about what's best for the state. It's about what's best for the country. So let's chill, take a breath, go take a walk on the beach, and come back and say, okay, what is best for? And I think that's also a hard thing for people to take themselves out and put what's best for in.
100%. It's funny because as you were making the comparison to temptation and how Satan gets in there and kind of twists everything around, I was thinking of two things. Number one, I was thinking of, you mentioned how the Florida Constitution's messed up. One of my good allies when I was there in the legislature, Spencer Roach, again, another good, true conservative Republican. Spencer Roach actually floated a bill, hey, let's have another constitutional convention, because when they edited the Florida Constitution, there's all kind of mistakes in there. There's all kind of, like you say, it's not a good constitution. You'll notice my friend Spencer Roach is, like me, no longer in the Florida legislature. So again, to your point about temptation, we have to ask ourselves, why are all the patriots, why are all the champions run out of the Florida legislature? I can mention Spencer Roach. I can mention Mike Beltran. Now, if you want a constitutional conservative, look no further than my good friend, former Representative Mike Beltran. Mike is a lawyer who's actually defending, or actually he's taken on the case of Matt the Welder. He's going to try and get Matt the Welder's name on the ballot, because again, that law they passed this year prohibiting name changes, that's unconstitutional. So Mike Beltran, he wasn't just your representative while he was serving. He is still a constitutional conservative, and he's proven it. People like myself, people like Anthony Sabatini, why do all the good conservatives get run out of the Florida legislature? Well, I think for some of us, we see the writing on the wall that how many days can I beat my head against the wall? Because again, in the Florida legislature, you have to get to 61. You need 61 votes to pass something. And with the deck stacked against you, it's hard to be an army of two. It's hard to be an army of three. So for some of us, I think we see the writing on the wall. For others, I think we refuse to succumb to temptation, as you mentioned, because, Saga, I have seen it personally. I've seen it myself with my former colleagues where, I have seen people that I really respected who got sent to Tallahassee for one purpose. They were very concentrated, focused on their mission. Then, 2 years later, they get kind of confused about why they're there. They get promised all these things. Hey, you'll have a chairmanship, you'll have this and that. Before long, their focus becomes more about being reelected. It becomes more about maintaining power. Power for what? What were you here to accomplish? Each time I got called back into session, even when I was on my way out the door, I filed the most conservative bills you'd ever see, particularly when I left to run for Congress, right? I filed a repeal of the red flag laws. I filed election integrity laws. I filed bills that you have never seen, the bill that repealed the private beaches here in Destin. I filed conservative bills that no other Republican would touch. And Saga, you know what? I got criticized. Fellow Republicans were saying, you're only doing this because you're on your way out the door, and there won't be any price to pay for you, being hardcore conservative. And to that, Saga, I responded, well, maybe we all should be limited to 2 years then, if this is what it takes to file honest to goodness conservative legislation. So again, I think it's very freeing when you're a guy in my city. Right now, I run a podcast. I have a medical practice. I can say what I believe, and no one can call me to tell me to take a tweet down. No one can call me into their office and say, we don't like how you made us look on Facebook. So I think there's something very freeing about you and I, but we need representatives who can stand in the fire, people who can go to the Republican majority leader, people who can go to the Speaker House and say, you know what, Mr. Speaker, all due respect, I don't care what you think. This is my belief.
And it's interesting because when you said your votes are gold, and this is my goal. My goal is to really, really raise the grassroots up, because if I walk in with like 2 people behind me, they're going to go. But if I walk in with thousands of people behind me, that these people vote and these people elected you because they are your constituents and you need to listen to them, that's powerful. And it goes back to Satan and how he twists things. Don't think your vote doesn't matter. Every single vote matters. I was talking to Paul Renner, and he said he lost his first election by 2 votes. So every single vote matters. And of course, it worked out fine for a myriad of reasons. And that's, again, he and I share the same belief in God, that God has a plan. God's got a plan. And thankfully, he doesn't always tell us what it is. And again, it's like that Garth Brooks song about thank God for unanswered prayers. But yeah, I want to raise up the grassroots and give them the power that they don't realize they already have. So I look
Saga,
at
I
you the
tell you
same
what.
way.
Well, thank you. So I'm going to answer that, but let me give you a little editing. I want to turn a light on. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
I'm almost talking to you in the dark here. There, that should be better.
I know you were getting kind of dark. We can lighten you up a little bit, but this will help a lot.
There we go. All right, there we go. So yes, let's empower the grassroots, right? Let's empower the grassroots, because they do have the golden ticket. None of this can get accomplished. Rick Scott couldn't have taken away your gun rights if you didn't vote him into office. And I hate to be so critical of fellow Republicans, but Saga, we need more Republicans like Mike Beltran. We need more Republicans like Spencer Roach. We need more Republicans like Paul Renner, like Jay Collins.
Yes.
We need Republicans. Well,
Yes.
I tell you the ultimate Florida Republican. We need more Republicans like Governor Ron DeSantis.
True. Absolutely true. And it's interesting because a friend of mine, I was talking to him, and he's been in politics forever. And he goes, oh, the reason he's not in is because he's the real deal. I was like,
That's
I know.
right. That's
I know.
right.
That's why we want them there. And another friend of mine said, she says, well, she goes, here's the thing is they have different ways of quote unquote getting rid of people. Oh, here, we'll offer you this shiny object, so you go here and you leave your position and you go there. And it's like, oh, look, see, we got rid of you. And it's such a game. It's such a widespread game. However, Joel, you and we got to raise up the grassroots. We got to let them know they have the power. You have the power.
They have the power.
Ruby slippers.
They have the ruby slippers, and they don't have to settle. Again, Saga, I hate to say it, but I feel like my vote has almost been prostituted in a way. I feel like there are some elections, and I felt this way as a young man when you asked me to turn out and vote for a Bob Dole, for example, for president. And Bob Dole, God bless him. He may be a great guy, and he may be a great conservative, but he's running against a charismatic young leader, who had the entire American community behind him. I'm like, you got to go hard. You got to go with well, back in the day, I think it was actually a Pat Buchanan fan. Again, that's how conservative I am, right?
Yeah.
But you look at leaders like Newt Gingrich. I mean, when's the last time we had a good Republican congressional leader? I go all the way back to Newt Gingrich and the Contract with America. So
Right.
to my fellow Republicans, I would say, you don't have to settle. There's a next generation Newt Gingrich out there. There's a next generation, Pat Buchanan or Ronald Reagan or Barry Goldwater or however far back you go. There is a next generation version of Ron DeSantis, but you have to give these candidates a chance. If you think after the transformation we've had in the state of Florida, how we've taken Florida from a purple state to a dark red state, if you think the media is going to help you, if you think the media is going to do your research for you and tell you who the next Ron DeSantis is, They've never liked Ron DeSantis. They darn
No.
sure don't want to pick the next DeSantis. So you're going to have to do the work yourself. You're going to have to
You know,
investigate these candidates. You're going to have to go on Twitter, social media. You're going to have to find out the real Paul Renner, the real Byron Donalds, the real Jay Collins, because, there's some duds in the group and there are some real heroes in the group.
what you're saying right there, it just struck me as like the media, they don't want that. It's like you can't believe anything. You really can't. It's like, okay, the polls are skewed. This is skewed. And now didn't they make some kind of rule where now a Republican group can't do a straw poll?
Oh,
Different
really?
things like that. Yeah, I heard that and I'm like, are you kidding me? Which is why you don't see them out everywhere. And again, there's got to be different places to get your information. We talked about that a little bit earlier about citizen journalists, because it's hard out there. However, talk to your friends that are in the know, and churches should be talking about this. A lot of people should be talking about this, and just look around. Don't go for the personality kind of, well, they're this, they're that. Look at the record, listen to what they're saying. Go for the adult in the room. you know,
Well, and
that's kind of
Saga,
how I put it.
I can tell you, I don't know why I keep coming back to endorsements, but I think that's almost a
Oh,
little bit of a
yes.
I think that's almost a little bit of a red flag too. When I see that, 50 members of the Florida House have endorsed a candidate for governor, those are bought endorsements.
Bought.
That's
Those are
basically
bought.
somebody strong arming those representatives saying, look, when I'm governor, if your name's not on this list, none of your projects are getting funded. None of your bills are getting heard. So endorsements from, state politicians like representatives and senators, I don't care about those. There's only one endorsement I care about in the state of Florida: Governor Ron DeSantis' endorsement. If DeSantis helps me, right now I'm divided between Collins and Renner. If Governor
Yeah.
DeSantis can help me break that deadlock, I will gladly accept his opinion on the matter, because I think, in my opinion, that's the only Republican endorsement that should matter. And Saga, just so your viewers know, when I did run to fill Matt Gaetz' seat in Pensacola here, like I said, there were 9 other Republicans in the race. 8 of them were honorable. Uh, the Republican Party was actively raising money for my opponent, for Jimmy Patronis, by saying, hey, save the district from the liberals. And look, there are 9 other Republicans in the race. They acted like they were raising money for all of it. They weren't raising money for any of us. They were raising money for one candidate, their coronated candidate, their preferred candidate. So that's why I loved how you said earlier in the show, if you do like an Aaron Baker, if you do like a Marshall Rawson, if you do like a Matt the Welder, do not give to any organizations. Do not even
No.
give to your party, because right
No.
now I have serious doubts about our leadership of our Republican Party. There's been some pretty serious charges leveled against them. I actually busted Evan Power earlier last week. We have an annual concert up here. It's a country music concert in Panama City. Evan Power also happens to be running for Congress. So Evan put out that the Republican Party of Florida is sponsoring the Gulf Coast Jam, and buy tickets here. Come here and listen to Keith Urban. So it sounded like Keith Urban had pretty much endorsed Evan Power for Congress. All it took was one phone call from me. That's a lie. What Evan Power was doing, he was taking an annual concert that Keith Urban was coming to anyway, and he was advertising it in a way to make it sound like he had paid for the concert. Here's the performers that he's invited to play. And so there's a lot of innuendo and a lot of back talk going on at the party level. Do
Yeah.
not write any checks to a party thinking it's going to get to Keith Gross, thinking it's going to get to
No.
my friend John Frankman here in Congressional District 1. If you love John Frankman, make your check out to John Frankman for Congress. If you want to support
Yes.
Keith Gross against a corrupt lobbyist like Evan Power, don't make your check out to RPOF. Make it out to Keith Gross for Congress.
Exactly. Yeah. And then also a lot of people have they get in and then they do their own PACs. And I guess you
Yeah.
do the PAC because you have a limit on how much people can give and a myriad of other reasons. And it's like, again, just give directly to the candidate, period. Directly to the candidate. Don't go don't go sideways. Do not take a left. Do not take a right. Go directly to the candidates to make sure, because running is expensive. Running's very
Well, and,
expensive.
and the other thing, we have people out there, really good citizens who watch those campaign finance reports. And as we mentioned earlier, it's really important to see who's donating early, right? Because the people putting up millions of dollars early, that's who that future governor is going to be beholden to. Now, understand, folks, as we get past the primary, okay, people, it's not going to be so much about, hey, who can I buy? It's that people
Right.
want to support a winner. So again, when
Right.
I was running for state house, nobody knew me. All my donations were small. The minute I crushed my opposition 67 to 33, I had checks coming in all over the place from people I didn't know because, in hindsight, they wanted to look like they were always with me kind of thing.
Right.
So again, if someone like a Paul Renner were to win the nomination, then all of a sudden it's not important who donated to whom, right? Because everyone hopefully will all be in with a Paul Renner or a Jay Collins or whoever wins the nomination. But for right now, with 5 or 6 candidates in the field, it's very important who's donating to whom. And again, I'm not talking about your neighbor Joe. Don't
Right.
begrudge Jay Collins if your mean neighbor down the road, donated to him. Please don't hold that against Jay. But by goodness,
Uh,
if someone's getting money from marijuana companies, if someone's getting money from companies like Trulieve who are selling your children out, that does matter.
yes, it does. It really does. Well, Joel, I want to thank you so much, and I could go on with you for so long. We can talk about so many different things because I think we're very much on the same page here. But I'm going to thank you very, very much for your time and officially say goodnight for now. But I would love to do a part 2 with you.
Let's definitely put it on the books, Saga, because you and I go way back. And,
Yeah.
you know, we need more champions of freedom in the Florida House. I'm afraid, if you want my prediction, I'm afraid we're in for a little bit of a shellacking this year just because we have so many rhinos in the party. I think we've got to purge the rhinos out of the system. So there may be a
Yeah.
couple years of pain. We'll still have the
Yep.
majority. So we'll still have a Republican Speaker of the House. But I'm very much a fan of the incoming Speaker, Sam Garrison. I think we're going to be
Okay,
in
good.
good hands. Now we need a Republican governor to go with him.
Yes, we do. All right, Joel. Thank you.
Thank you, Saga.